before my college graduation, my younger brother called my mom and told her I'd been acting like I was better than everyone ever since I got accepted to Penn State on a full academic scholarship. My mom called me 20 minutes later and asked me to tone it down at the ceremony. I was 22 years old. I'd worked 3 part-time jobs for 4 years, maintained a 3.9 GPA, and was about to walk across a stage to accept a degree I had earned entirely on my own. And my mother was calling me the night before to ask me to be less. I should have known then. I should have packed my things and moved to Pittsburgh the second I hung up. But I didn't. I said, "Okay, Mom," and I went to sleep, and the next morning, I put on my cap and gown and drove to the venue and sat in the 3rd row with 300 other graduates, and I told myself today was my day. That was my first mistake, believing that anything in my family could ever just be mine. Let me back up, because you need to understand how long this had been going on before the day everything finally broke open. My brother is 4 years younger than me. His name is not important, but what he has always been, is the person my parents built their entire identity around. When we were kids, my parents drove 45 minutes each way to take him to travel baseball every weekend, from April through August. I took the city bus to my Saturday math competitions alone. When he got a C in chemistry junior year, my dad hired a tutor. When I got a B+ in AP Calculus, my mom told me I needed to manage my stress better. He dropped out of community college after 1 semester. My parents told everyone he was taking a gap year to explore his options. That was 6 years ago. He has worked maybe 11 months total in those 6 years. And every single month, something happens that requires my parents to step in financially. His car breaks down. His roommate bails on the rent. He lent money to a friend who never paid him back. There is always a reason. There is always a story. And there is always my mother, nodding, opening her checkbook, exclaiming to me later that he just needs a little more time to find his footing. Meanwhile, I was paying my own cell phone bill at 17. I don't say this to sound bitter. I say it because it's true, and because the night of my graduation party, when my brother stood up in the middle of the restaurant my parents had booked to celebrate me and knocked over a champagne flute, grabbed the small table centerpiece, and threw it against the wall, I was not surprised. I was not shocked. I had been waiting for something like that for years. What surprised me was my mother's reaction. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The scholarship was a big deal. I want to be clear about that, not to brag, but because it matters for the story. It was a merit scholarship. Full tuition, room and board, renewable annually. My parents did not pay a single dollar for my education. I had filled out the application myself at 16, in the bedroom I shared with nobody because my brother had the bigger room with the private bathroom. At the desk my grandmother had left me because she knew, I think, even then, that I was the one who would need a desk. My grandmother passed the spring of my sophomore year. She left me her car, a 10-year-old Civic that had 90,000 miles on it and still ran perfectly, and a small savings account with about $4,200 in it. She told me in the letter the attorney read aloud that the money was for something that mattered to me. She did not leave anything to my brother. My parents never said anything about that directly, but I noticed the way my dad's jaw tightened when the attorney finished reading, and I noticed the way my brother looked at me from across the room. That look didn't go away, it just went underground. The graduation party was my mom's idea. She wanted to do something nice, she said. She found a private dining room at an Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and bread service and a prefixy menu that runs about $60 a head. She told me she was inviting immediate family only. My parents, my brother, my aunt and uncle from Columbus, and my dad's cousin who I've always been close with. 12 people total. A nice dinner. That was all it was supposed to be. I should have been suspicious when my brother was quiet through the appetizers. He's never quiet. He talks over everyone, redirects every conversation back to himself. Does this thing where he starts a story and then pretends to get a text and makes everyone wait while he checks it. Classic attention behavior, my therapist would later call it. But at the time I just thought he was exhausting. The quiet should have been a warning sign. It was somewhere between the salad course and the entree when my dad stood up and gave a toast. He talked about how proud he was, how hard I had worked, how this was a beginning and not an ending. It was actually a good toast. My dad is not a warm man most of the time, and I could see that he meant it. And for a few seconds I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was clenched. Then my brother pushed back his chair. He didn't stand all the way up at first. He just pushed back from the table like he needed room, and then he stood up and he picked up his champagne glass, and he said loud enough that the table next to us went quiet, "I just want to say something." My mom said, "Honey." He said, "No, I need to say this." What came next took maybe 4 minutes, but felt like 40. He talked about how I had always been held up as the example, how everything was always about my grades, my scholarship, my future, how nobody ever asked him what he needed, how the family had spent years treating him like he didn't matter, how I had always acted like I was better than him, and now I was going to spend the rest of my life thinking I had proven it. At some point during the speech, he knocked over his champagne glass. I don't think it was intentional. His hands were shaking. But the glass hit the centerpiece, a small arrangement of white flowers in a low vase, and the vase went off the edge of the table and hit the floor and shattered. The water spread across the tile. A woman at the next table gasped. The restaurant went quiet. My brother kept talking. His voice was getting louder. He said I had stolen the family's attention for 22 years. He said the scholarship money should have been split with him to help him get on his feet. He said I thought I was better than everyone, and tonight was proof. And then he picked up the small floral arrangement that was still on the table, the backup one near the breadbasket, and he threw it. Not at me. Not directly at anyone. He threw it toward the wall. It hit a framed print, knocked it sideways, and landed on the floor with a crash. The restaurant went completely still. I did not move. I sat with my hands flat on the table, and I did not move. My mother stood up. She went to my brother. She put her hands on his arms, and she said, "And I will never forget this as long as I live." She said, "You've been carrying this for so long. It's okay. Let it out." Not to me, to him. On the night of my graduation dinner, after he had just screamed at me in front of 12 people and thrown things against the wall, my aunt from Columbus said, very quietly, "Oh my God." I looked at my dad. He was looking at the table. I said nothing. I picked up my water glass and I took a sip and I set it back down and I said nothing. The waiter came over. My dad handled it, apologized, offered to pay for the print, asked if we could get the check. My brother was crying by then, and my mother had her arm around him, and I sat across the table, and I looked at my hands and I thought, this is the last time. This is the absolute last time. My dad's cousin, the one I'm close with, reached under the table and squeezed my hand. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed it and held on for a second. That meant more to me in that moment than anything else that happened that night. We drove home in separate cars. Mine was my grandmother's Civic. I had driven it to the restaurant with my overnight bag in the back because I had a job orientation the next morning. I had accepted a position at a consulting firm in Philadelphia, starting in 3 weeks, and the orientation was a day trip. I sat in the parking lot for about 10 minutes before I started the engine. I wasn't crying. I want to be clear about that. I was past crying. I had cried about my family at various points throughout my life. At 11, when my brother got the birthday party I had asked for 2 years in a row. At 15, when my parents missed my regional math competition because he had a baseball game that turned out to be rained out. At 19, when they told me they couldn't help me with groceries that month because he needed help with his security deposit. I had used up a lot of tears on this particular situation. What I felt sitting in that parking lot was not grief. It was clarity. I opened my phone. I had 3 things to do, and I knew exactly what they were. The first thing, I had been co-signing my brother's apartment lease for the past 2 years. He had needed a co-signer because his credit score was below 580, and my parents had asked me to do it as a favor, and I had said yes because I was 20, and I thought family meant something, and I didn't understand yet what I was agreeing to. White linen tablecloths. White linen tablecloths. White linen tablecloth. White linen tablecloths. White Reddit score was collateral for his inability to manage money. I called his property management company's after-hours line and left a message stating that I would not be renewing my cosigner agreement when the lease came up in 6 weeks and that I was formally requesting to be removed from the existing cosigner documentation as soon as legally possible. I also sent an email to the leasing office with the same information in writing so there would be a record. The second thing, my parents had been putting money into a shared savings account every month. They called it the family fund, said it was for emergencies, and I had been matching their contributions for the past 18 months because they asked me to, because I was finally making steady money from internships, because I thought it was a responsible thing to do. But 2 months earlier, I had noticed a withdrawal of $1,400 that nobody told me about. When I asked my mom, she said it had been used for something that came up. I pushed, and eventually she admitted it had gone to my brother for back rent. Nobody asked me. Nobody told me. They just took $400 of money I had contributed and gave it to him. I had never closed my access to that account because I had never imagined I would need to. That night, sitting in the parking lot, I transferred my entire contribution balance, $2,760, into my personal savings account and sent my parents a text. I removed my contributions from the family fund. I'll explain later. Then I removed my ACH authorization from the account, so no future transfers could be made from my personal account. The third thing took me a little longer. My parents had always talked about helping me with the down payment on my first home. Nothing formal, nothing in writing, just the kind of thing parents say, the kind of thing you quietly factor into your 5-year plan without realizing it. My mom had said as recently as Thanksgiving that they had been setting aside money for it. I didn't have access to that account, but I could remove it from my plans. I opened my budget spreadsheet. Yes, I keep a budget spreadsheet. Yes, I have since I was 18. And I deleted the line that said family contribution estimated, and I adjusted my savings targets accordingly. It hurt a little. I had been counting on that number, but counting on money from people who had just taken money from me without asking was a fantasy, and I was done with fantasies. I started the car. I drove home. I did not call my mother back when she called at 11:47 p.m. The next morning, my phone started going off at 7:15. My brother had called the leasing office as soon as they opened and was told about my message. He called me 4 times in a row and then texted, "Are you serious right now? You're going to make me lose my apartment because you're mad about dinner?" My mother called at 7:30. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 7:34 and 7:41 and 7:41. The voicemail at 7:30 was calm. She said she understood I was upset, that things had gotten out of hand last night, that she hoped we could talk. The voicemail at 7:55 was not calm. She said she couldn't believe I had moved money out of the family account without discussing it. She said I was being vindictive. She said my brother was in a really fragile place, and this was going to set him back. She did not say one word about what he had done the night before. I sat in a Panera near the orientation site, ate a bagel, and listened to all of it. Then I texted my mother. "I'd like to talk, but I need to say a few things first. Can we do a call tonight at 7? She said yes. That call lasted 2 hours and 13 minutes. I know because I looked at it later. I said things I had never said out loud before. I said that I had been the responsible one my entire life, not because I was naturally more capable, but because I was never given the option to be anything else. I said that co-signing his lease had put my financial future at risk and that nobody had ever acknowledged that. I said that taking money from a shared account without telling me was a betrayal of trust regardless of who it went to. I said that last night he had screamed at me at my own graduation dinner and thrown things, and she had held him and told him to let it out, and she had not once, looked at me and asked if I was okay. She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said, "I know I've made mistakes." It wasn't enough. It wasn't close to enough. But it was the first time in my life I had ever heard her say that, and I didn't know what to do with it. It's been 8 months since graduation. My brother's lease situation resolved without my involvement. I'm not sure how. I stopped tracking it. I moved to Philadelphia. I have a 900 square foot apartment that I pay for entirely by myself, and every single thing in it is mine. and nobody calls me on Sunday night to tell me to tone it down. I still talk to my parents. It's careful now, measured, scheduled, with clear limits on what I will and won't discuss. My therapist calls this modified contact and says it's healthy. My dad called me last month just to check in, no agenda, and we talked for 20 minutes about a documentary I'd watched, and it was fine. More than fine, actually. It was almost normal. My brothers and I have not spoken since that night. I don't miss what we had. I miss what I thought we had when I was 12 and still believed the family I was born into was the family I would have my whole life. I grieve that version of things sometimes, but I don't miss the real version. The morning after my graduation dinner, before the orientation, before the phone calls, I sat in my grandmother's car in a Panera parking lot, and I thought about the letter she had left me. The money was for something that matters to you, she had written. I had spent it carefully. New tires for the Civic, books for my senior year, 3 months of emergency savings. Every dollar intentional, every dollar mine. I think she knew. I think she understood something about my family that I was still learning. And I think she gave me that car and that money the same way she had always quietly handed me things when I was a kid. A book she thought I'd like, an extra 20 when she hugged me goodbye, her old desk. Not as gifts exactly, but as messages. As a way of saying, I see you. You're going to be okay. You don't have to wait for anyone to hand you your life. She was right. I am okay. I keep coming back to the desk. My grandmother's old writing desk, the one she left me specifically, the one my parents never asked about because it wasn't worth any money. She didn't leave it to me because it was valuable. She left it to me because she had watched me sit at it for years, doing homework, while everyone else watched TV, writing college essays, while my brother slept in his bigger room down the hall. She saw something in that image that I was too young to name. She was passing something down, not furniture, not money, a way of understanding what your own life is worth. I think about cause and effect a lot now, not in a mystical way. I don't believe the universe was keeping score, or that my brother's unraveling at that restaurant table was some kind of cosmic punishment. I think it's simpler than that, and also harder. The choices we make every day, quietly, without applause, are the architecture of who we become. Every morning I woke up and studied instead of sleeping in. Every semester I filed my own financial aid paperwork. Every time I said yes to something hard because it was the right thing for my future, those weren't lucky breaks. They were bricks. And I laid every one of them myself. My brothers made choices too. He chose, over and over, to wait for someone else to build the floor beneath him. And my parents chose, over and over, to be that floor. None of them were evil people. But good intentions don't cancel out consequences. You can love someone into helplessness. You can protect a person so completely that they never develop the one thing they actually need. The understanding that the world does not owe them comfort, and that the only way through difficulty is through it. What I had to learn, and it took me longer than I'd like to admit, was that being principled isn't the same as being passive. I had been ethical my whole life in the easiest possible sense. I didn't lie, I didn't cheat, I didn't take what wasn't mine. But real integrity showed up that night in the parking lot, when I had to decide whether I was going to keep absorbing the consequences of other people's choices, or whether I was going to hold the line. Removing myself from that lease wasn't cruelty. It was honesty. I was finally being honest about what I could not keep carrying. The intelligence piece, and I mean this, less about grades and more about how you read a situation, is knowing the difference between a problem you can solve and a dynamic you have to exit. I had been trying to solve my family for 22 years, analyzing it, adjusting my behavior, making myself smaller or quieter or more accommodating. Smart people can trap themselves in bad situations by convincing themselves that the next clever move will be the one that fixes everything. It won't. Sometimes the intelligent choice is the one that looks like giving up from the outside but feels, from the inside, like finally standing up straight. And the grit, that part I'm proudest of, honestly. Not the grit of grinding to hard work, though there was plenty of that. The harder kind, staying steady in a moment when everything in you wants to react. Sitting at that table with my hands flat and my face still while my brother screamed and my mother comforted him and my dad looked at the tablecloth. Not because I was numb. Because I had decided, somewhere very deep and very quiet, that I was not going to let this be the story that defined me. I was going to let my actions afterward do the talking. My grandmother's letter said the money was for something that mattered to me. I finally know what mattered most. The decision, made alone in a parking lot at 10 p.m., to stop waiting for my family to see my value and to simply live it.